Hello and welcome to another edition of Hometown Histories, a project of the Ocean Township Museum. I'm Dallas Grove. Today on a mild day in March 2016, we'll focus on one of Ocean Township's boldest visions and lasting legacies, the acquisition of the historic field test site, now Joe Palaia Park, our own Central Park, conceived 45 years ago in 1971. Dr. Kenneth Lutz started as an associate member of the Environmental Commission in 1974. He's broken the 40-year record of involvement, having been past chairman of both the Environmental Commission and the Shade Tree Commission, and bringing in over $100,000 in grants and environmental projects, big and small. Professionally, he is the managing partner of AMR Strategies and an adjunct professor of electrical and computer engineering at the University of Delaware. He was awarded an IEEE Congressional Fellowship and worked as a science advisor to U.S. Senator Ron Wyden, having had a career on the technical staff of Bell Labs, Bellcore, and Telcordia Technologies. Raymond Hodnett, a landscape architect, was engaged by the town in 1974 to do a study of the Deal Lake watershed as a project of his Rutgers landscape architectural graduating class. That study was such a standout, the town hired him to design the plans for the development of Deal Test Site. He worked professionally as a landscape architect for many years, designing the Grove in Shrewsbury on Route 35 and downtown Freehold and other award-winning projects. In a career change several years ago, he is now CEO of a small software development company specializing in cloud-based software for municipal governments and nonprofit grant-making organizations. Starting at the beginning, Ken, and the beginning goes way, way back to prehistoric times. Tell us, let you know about the early days of the OTS site.
Let me first say that in the early 1960s, some Boy Scouts walking on what's now Joe Palaia Park discovered some arrowheads. Mm-hmm. And it was later found these arrowheads came from the Lenni Lenape Native Americans, otherwise called the Delaware Indians. And that's about the only ancient evidence that there was anybody there before Europeans. Prior to 1817, the land that's now Joe Palaia Park was owned by Nathan Woolley, Woolley being a very prominent old family in Monmouth County. In 1817, Woolley sold 63 acres to a Jacob Croxon. These 63 acres form the southern half of what's now Joe Palaia Park.
Mm-hmm. Which is, let me just interject, where Joe Palaia Park and Deal Test Site are. They're at the intersection and covering Whale Pond Road, Deal Road, and Warwick to Dow Avenue.
Yes.
And 208 acres.
Now it's 208 acres. Mm-hmm. But Croxon bought 63 and started farming it. In 1823, his son was walking along a marshy area on the property and saw something on the ground, picked it up, and later they discovered it was a mastodon tooth. He looked around, found a few other teeth. They finally started digging and discovered that there was a complete skeleton of a mastodon. It evidently had walked along, fell into a marl pit, sort of like quicksand. Mm-hmm. But marl is a very soft, watery substance sometimes, and it's used for fertilizer, right? Mm-hmm. We have marl pit hall in Marlboro. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A lot of marl in New Jersey. Evidently, this mastodon just fell into this, didn't sink that far, because at the bottom, about 8 feet below the surface, was a bed of sand and gravel. Mm-hmm. So the mastodon ended up in an erect position with his top of the body just below the surface of the land.
And what year was that?
This was 1823, and we know about this because the following year, in a New York Natural History Journal, there was a publication all about the discovery and the mastodons. Now, the last known mastodons on Earth lived about 10,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So we know how ancient that is.
Wow.
Today, nobody knows where the skeletons are. The skeleton is.
Mm-hmm. It was shipped to a university, those that remember anything say, but we don't know which one or when.
That's what they say, but we don't know. So the land in the 19th century changed hands a few times. It ultimately ended up in the hands of Henry Fox of Philadelphia in 1896. And he named this land Foxhurst Farms, still the 63 acres. And he farmed it.
That's funny, I remember that name, but I thought it was for the fox on the property. I never knew it was for the guy's name.
Yeah. So Henry Fox of Philadelphia. And so he farmed it for about 20 years, and in 1919, he sold it to the Western Electric Company. Now, the Western Electric Company is the manufacturing arm of AT&T, which was the telephone monopoly in the United States. And Western Electric made all their equipment. And to make all that equipment, they also experimented with new equipment for new telephony services. And so they were interested in this site because as soon as they bought the property in 1919, they erected 3 towers. So they owned the 63 acres in 1919, and in 1927, they bought 145 other acres.
Uh-huh.
So that's how we get the 200 or so acres in Joe Palaia Park today. So in 1919, they erected these 3 towers for the purpose of broadcasting speech and music. And they were able to broadcast this over a range of 1,000 miles. Some entrepreneur in Asbury Park knew about this, built a radio, put it on a wheelchair so he could wheel it along the boardwalk, and played music for the strollers along the boardwalk for a fee. For a fee. So they bought the property in 1919. In 1921, they built the 2-story white building that stands there today. It's the only 2-story building on the property. The southern half of the building, so the half closest to Deal Road, was a laboratory. And we have a photo of the inside of the laboratory showing that part of it was actually 2 stories high for very tall equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And the northern half of the building was living quarters. So we have a photo of a dining room. I counted the chairs. It seats 18 people.
Wow.
There are bedrooms with a photograph of the bedroom, a kitchen. And the reason for this is back in 1920s, this was essentially in the middle of nowhere. And for people to come here and start experiments on the equipment, there were no motels around.
Right.
So they had to live on site. And in fact, I would like to read something from a publication that came out of AT&T or Western Electric. It says, Deal Beach, which is what they call this, Deal Beach is a transmitting station. It is also owned by the company, meaning AT&T, and it is one of the pioneering stations in broadcasting work. It is one of the first stations in the world to broadcast a musical program for entertainment, which is why those 3 towers were there. A staff of 8 engineers is on duty, and it lists the engineers. It also says there was a mechanic on staff and Mr. and Mrs. Sherman caretakers.
Uh-huh.
So I assume they might have lived there permanently. So in the early 1920s, AT&T conducted what they call ship-to-shore telephone experiments. So you could actually call to a ship or be on a ship and call back to the United States.
That was in the
Early 1920s.
That's remarkable.
So you could be in a ship as far as 300 miles at sea and make a call all the way to California or Catalina Island off the coast of California in the 1920s. And in fact, we have an advertisement here that was published in the Herald Tribune in 1929 saying, at 11:45 on Sunday, December 8th, from any Bell telephone in this country, you can make a call to the ship or vice versa. The charge, $21 for the first 3 minutes, and every minute thereafter, another $7. The service will be available on all incoming and outgoing trips as long as the ship was in range, and the range being about 300 miles off. In the later 1920s, they had erected the 3 towers that are standing now, the ones with the crossbars on the top.
Yeah.
And we have those 3 towers now. In fact, if you go out to Joe Palaia Park and look, one of the towers has a very large osprey nest on top. And the same family of osprey keep coming back every year and having a little osprey. But when they erected those 3 towers, 2 of the smaller towers, the original towers, had to come down. The 3rd one was still standing until about 20 years ago when it fell over. And I think the remnants of the tower are still sitting there in the swamp. So in the late 1920s, they started commercial radio service to Europe, actually to England. Now, I have to say that Deal Tessite, as it was known then, was only one of a number of stations along the coast that AT&T had. The site continued experimenting, and World War II came along, and they got involved in some radar work. And in fact, a very important piece of equipment used for radar was invented there. In 1953, AT&T decided to sell the site. They were no longer using it. And Fort Monmouth did not buy it. Actually, 2 people from Jersey City bought it, named Fangman and Scott. They bought the site and then leased it to the Army. So that gave the Army at Fort Monmouth access to the site. And the purpose was to start tracking satellites. Of course, in 1953, there were no satellites. The first satellite that went up was the Russian Sputnik. And at Deal Test Site, Deal Test Site was the first location in the United States of anybody receiving signals from Sputnik, because we had the equipment and the antennas set up there.
So they knew this era was coming of satellites, and they built in anticipation.
Because we were, in the 50s, we were testing rockets and trying to put up satellites. So, in fact, there's a one-story building behind the 2-story building, sort of catty corner on the other side of the street, on the side of the driveway, I should say. It was called the Satellite Tracking Building, and it was filled with satellite equipment. We actually have a photograph of Werner von Braun inside the building.
You mentioned rocketry, and that was basically his specialty, wasn't it?
His specialty was rocketry, and in fact, they not only tracked satellites from both the U.S. and the Soviet Union, but also they did some tracking of rocket launches as well.
For our audience who may not have heard of Werner von Braun, tell us who he was and how we acquired him, actually.
Werner von Braun was the father of the V-2 rockets in Germany during World War II, and at the end of the war, the U.S. Army brought him to the United States to work on rockets for the U.S. They brought him and many other German scientists. So, in 1957, the first satellite went up by the Russians, Sputnik, and pretty soon the U.S. started sending satellites up. And there was a communication satellite that basically would receive radio signals and send them back to Earth. And so Field Test Site again, in 1957, sent the first fax by satellite.
Amazing.
They sent a fax up to the satellite. It was relayed down to Puerto Rico. So as the 1960s and early 70s came along, the Army's interest in Field Test Site waned. They decided they weren't going to use it anymore, and the owners of the property, Bangman and Scott, eventually sold it to Ocean Township, and Ocean Township purchased the land under the Green Acres program.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost impossible to believe that you got it for the town, because it was such really a very new thing to start preserving land like that, to recognize the demographics were moving in such a way that if you didn't do it now, you could never do it. The cost would be prohibitive. In just a few years' time, it never...
foresight.
And it's a group of people here that made that happen, who had that foresight, had to fight, really, to say, this is serious stuff. You have to think about it now. You have to plan for it now. You have to kind of, put aside those other impulses you might have, which are the natural ones. Everybody knows development is good, smokestacks are great, and stop, say...
Ratables are good.
What's that?
Ratables.
Ratables are good, and you say, well, what else is good? Where else is this community going? What else does it have to do? It was just an incredible win.
It was an incredible win, and very much attributable to a man who still is in town, Al Pereckman. He had seen the potential for this being a Central Park kind of thing. Maybe a year or two before even the establishment of the Environmental Commission. He had cataloged what pieces of town should be acquired, Field Test Site among them, but stream corridors, marshes, floodplains, wetlands, and he put together a list of, I think it was 26 parcels that the town should and must acquire to stop the coming onslaught of flooding in Ocean Township.
Amazing. And, early on, when I got involved with doing some of the design work with the town, there were already talks about this incredibly far-reaching stuff, really, about the Field Test Site being in the middle, but it connecting from really Asbury Park through Deal Lake Corridor, through the Deal and Hollywood golf courses, to Field Test Site, to the school sites, to the Welch tract, to Eatontown, to the golf course in West Long Branch.
When you look at it, it's a green belt.
Yeah, it's just, and it happened kind of by accident, but this one was a very important part of that. It's just amazing that it's there. And that's yet to be done. And eventually, that bike route will go through all those private lands. It really will. And people want that. And there's, ways of protecting people with private lands for opening up lands for those purposes now. So it'll happen. It's pretty cool.
Well, I think it was just an amazing confluence of events and the right people at the right time.
But in the early 1970s, Ocean Township was undergoing a real growth spurt, and people wanted houses. What did it take to convince town officials to actually apply for a grant to buy the land?
They actually were convinced the Environmental Commission had just been appointed by the council. That's right, the mayor actually makes the appointment. And that came at a time when there was I guess it was The Silent Spring, had been written by Rachel Carson. It was a great growing environmental awareness. And I am amazed as you are that it actually didn't take an awful lot to convince them to acquire the land. After a while they did. They did not proceed on many of the other projects of the stream corridors and such like that, which has also been a problem in Ocean Township's drainage. But
but credit where credit's due.
yes, there's no question. As a matter of fact, Steve Levy, who was the chairman of the Environmental Commission,
and the founder
of it, right? Yeah, we were one of the first environmental commissions in the state. And then Fenton Hudson came along, and he was very interested, and he took it on immediately as his goal to make that application work and to keep it going. It was a big thing about getting it to keep going, because a lot of towns were now going for the Green Acres money that was now available. The DEP had just started in 1970, Department of Environmental Protection in New Jersey, and they created the Green Acres Division, and there was only $13 million in their bucket for 566 towns, and we wanted 7% of that, 8% of that right off the top, and they gave it to us because they said the history, the location.
East of 35.
East of 35, one of the last remaining parcels, east of 35. It was, yeah, and they were visionaries. So it was the fact that there was a Green Acres program instituted, and that we were right there with it.
So that was an acquisition. They were also funding development. Was it $13 million for both?
No, it was. I think it was just acquisition.
So, a huge portion of their funding to go to acquisition.
Right, and we wanted it for, I think the Scots had put up for sale for $2.1 million. We had to put up half of that. That's the deal. They would put up half it for matching grants. And so we had to put up $1 million. It sounded like an awful lot of money. In a time when homes cost $7,000.
But I understand there was also a study done to help convince the population that this is a good deal.
So just to say again that it was the right people at the time that the state was moving on this, the land became available. It's just an amazing confluence of events and the right people. Steve Levy heading the commission was terrific, and he freely says, and Benton K. Hudson following through on that application
as the
administrator. Actually, as the head of the Green Acres Committee of the Environmental Commission, he worked on it. And then he later became the manager of the town.
And there was a Deal Lake Advisory Committee, or was that part of the same thing? Is that the same thing?
It was the Deal Side Advisory Committee. And
separate from the Environmental Commission?
No, within the Environmental Commission, yeah. And we just kept accumulating people. Now, Ken came from an area of your career in the labs and such. I mean, all this stuff must be like magical to you to go through the history of the site and what they did in those early days.
Yes. And in fact, fortunately, I was working at Bell Labs and was able to go to the archivist there and get some old photos. And that's why we have them today in the History Museum.
You had said before there wasn't any proof of habitation other than Europeans, other than the arrowheads. But I remember some documentation that there was the Lenny Lenape Beach Plum Trail went through the site. And there were beach plum when we did our study of the site, and probably still are out there.
And there's a reason for that. I mean, because some of the Native Americans were mapped throughout all of New Jersey, they knew about these trails. But on the site itself, it was farmed, so the land is largely dug up. And then when AT&T and Western Electric were putting in their antennas, they put a lot of underground cables in, which are still there. And so, again, the land was disturbed. So that's the problem with finding any type of artifacts now.
It's funny, because it's not great land for farming. And there's plenty of land around back then. So you wonder, what did that happen, really? What was the deal with that? Other than maybe they were doing some marl mining.
They could have been doing that, and maybe part of the marshy area was part of the sale of the tract. You know, take the good land, but you have to take the bad land as well when they bought the first 63 acres. But what's amazing, and it's also a lesson, since the land was pretty much cleared as a farm, and we have photographs of this two-story white building back from the 1920s, there's nothing around it. It's just all lawn.
It was a working site.
And now you look at it, and it's fully wooded. So you can see in the past almost 100 years how the natural vegetation has taken over.
And we talked about, moving this building here from where it was and how quickly it took over. One of the
museum
that we were in, where it was moved from, and there were some trees taken down in that move. One of the things that annoyed me later on about the process was we wanted to put in that retention pond. And, you have to break some eggs, right, to make the omelet, which means the retention pond by necessity has to be in the But, stuff repairs itself so quickly. And, we'll talk about that a little bit, but, we just have two examples of complete transformation of the land within our lifetimes, really.
Right, exactly. Can we just ask you this? What drew you then to the Environmental Commission in those early days? You were a resident in the town.
We had moved to the town in 1971. You were talking about the environmental movement that started the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. This was right after Earth Day.
Right.
The first Earth Day was in 1970. Mm-hmm. So people, including myself, were aware of the environment. So we moved into town. The teenager across the street from us came to us, said, "Welcome to town. I'm collecting glass bottles. Would you start recycling?"
Oh, great. Mm-hmm.
And so we started recycling. And then probably a year or two later, I bumped into Steve Levy, and in his very forceful way, we all know Steve, said, "You're coming to the Environmental Commission. We need you."
Right. He did have a way of collecting people.
Yes.
I myself read that in the newspaper. We moved into town in 1971, and it said, "The Environmental Commission is going to have a recycling drive. We need people to get on the truck." This is an editorial in the Asbury Park Press. So everybody, come out and help them. Oh, about 10 people showed up at the parking lot at Town Hall. And we got into dump trucks and drove around town and picked up recyclables that people had put out to prove to the council that people would do it. They would participate. And surely they did. And very, very soon after that followed a mandatory newspaper recycling. So,
the
and
first,
we had the
first in the state.
The first in the state, yeah.
Yeah, there's, very often in history, confluences of people that come together and things happen, right? So I didn't know I was in one when I was in Ocean Township until I came back to do some work, and I wasn't part of it. But I recognized what had happened when I came back to do some work here. The next time that happened to me, by the way, I was working at Red Bank, and we were putting together that whole special improvement district, which was a new thing. And then it attracted a certain type of person who they were already very accomplished people, and they were able to put that thing together, and we all know what happened to Red Bank since then, right?
Mm-hmm.
And very
right.
Well, of course, it's been called the hippest town in New Jersey, and it was not at one time.
It was called Dead Bank at one time.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, started to do that, and only, in my opinion, could have happened with this incredible group of talented people. When I finally started to do some work for the town, late college years, and after I graduated, the work that I had to do was minimized by the amount of work that had been done. Incredibly high quality, detailed environmental studies, historical studies, the stuff you're quoting now was done then by you and others, but there was this understanding of the interrelationships of the soils and plants and economics, demographics.
The integration.
It was all done. I mean, I did assemble it and put it into a report. It was typed by Miss Peggy Watt Dellinger, and later submitted as an application to the DEP. But it was incredibly well documented. The Environmental Commission had done other things for the whole town, the Lake Watershed study, but it was again. You come out of college and you thought you were cutting edge, and you realize these guys are here 10, 15 years ago doing really cool things.
Some credentials, some not.
If I may interject, though, you shouldn't minimize your role because, yes, we had all this stuff done, perhaps, but you brought it all together in a language that people could understand.
Well,
say, here's a vision, for field test site.
Right, but you talked about that Girl Scout survey.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody had a feeling about what should be there.
Absolutely. And we had put that together, trying to solicit public support by asking for public input, which was a wonderful way to go, because it put us right in touch with people on the street, where they standing outside food towns, taking surveys. Yes.
And not only was it a survey of what people were interested in, but it was also a way of reaching out to people and making them aware that this was going to be developed.
But Ray, your class at Rutgers worked on the Deal Lake watershed study.
Yeah.
And that was actually your entree into all of this, and how we became aware of you as somebody out there who could be one of us.
Well, thanks. And I was introduced by Howard Holt. Again, a very interesting guy, scientific in his background and his approach, and truly appreciated the things you were doing, and the approach that you had, which was science-based. Yeah, you hired a group of Rutgers students in the Department of Landscape Architecture to put together a resource inventory for a watershed. Most people didn't know what a resource inventory was. No one knew what a watershed was. And you found money that was here and hired a group of people to put it together into this study, right? And of course, the school loved to do it. They made money off of it. They were able to produce a very nice report. But again, this body of work and understanding of the township, the requests that the Environmental Commission made were science-based. Mm-hmm. They were study-based. They were, trend-based. They were talking about the future, based on things that happened in the past. And one of the things that struck me when I was in school was that the township was growing at around 40% faster than 40% per year per decade. Pardon me. A growth of 40% in one decade versus 7% for the state. Mm-hmm. I mean, just an extraordinary. And of course, the BEP knew that, right? Mm-hmm. So they knew what the township was going to look like.
Great migration from North Jersey.
Right. Where the people from Newark, all came down here, it seemed, and we talk about
Jersey City.
That's a county generally. All over the place.
Yeah. One of the things was in Howard suggesting you. He said, "I have a friend who can help," and that was a boon for us, because not only was it not that expensive, but he kind of put you on the map and established your cred in Ocean Township, and that led to your being hired as the one to do the planning for the development of the site.
Yeah, well, the thing that you were missing, as Ken alluded to, was that visual vocabulary, which is the thing that people generally need to coalesce around an idea, right? Because until it has that picture, the 1,000 words are tough to read.
The one thing about the Deer Lake watershed study that you did, because we had other natural resource inventories, right, including one on Poplar Brook that covered field test site in Joe Palaia Park. Those other natural resource inventories were standard format. Here are the plants, here are the animals, here are the soils. Just absolutely boring to read, but very factual. You came along and you added a visual element to it.
Well, yeah, that was my cohorts up at Rutgers. I mean, credit where credit's due. There was an incredible group of talented people in that senior class that were doing that for you guys.
All I wanted to say was that all of a sudden we had a natural resource inventory that people could read and understand, because it brought it home to the visual impacts, and then the relationship between the trees and the animals and the plants and the soils.
The NRI, natural resource inventory that we did, was, that more visual aspect of that. And then, which layered into the design of the field test site eventually. They were, again, science-based. Which was unusual at the time. It was new. It was not earth-shattering or record-breaking or anything like that. But it was a new tool. New tool that started to be used, and you used it. So, that's kind of cool.
You know, where it was very effective in presenting to councils, planning boards. I mean, they could then visualize what I can barely do is read a map.
Yeah, and in tenor of the time show thing, they were looking to say yes.
Yes.
But they needed someone to help them say yes, and that's what you provided with them. You gave them some, again, science-based data to say, it's crazy not to do these people testing. And then again, different people in the community, people who were part of the Environmental Commission, various others as well. So it was interesting, again, giving credit, that confluence of people coming together at that time, right? Joe Palaia at the council level. Some others there.
He was very, very much for the park. I remember a meeting at which he told an objector because he couldn't see spending this much money, this is the most important thing that this town will ever do.
Did he not come on a journey from not understanding that to understanding it?
Well, yes, but you know what? I think that all of the input that we had made it a very short journey for him.
Yeah.
He was there.
But there was an element of people in town, actually two, opposed to this. One was a set of environmentalists who say, don't do anything, leave it in its natural state.
Yeah.
Because there are so few lands undisturbed, well, although it was disturbed. And then there was another group of people afraid this was going to raise their taxes.
In fact, there's association actually almost grew up around it.
But the nice thing about Ray's development plan is there was something in it for everybody. The township could look at that and say, yes, this is going to draw people to the site. They will see it as a center for the town, use it for activities, which has proven true, and there are parts to this that are preserved in the natural state, some for nature's reasons, some for environmental reasons, such as flooding. So there was something in it for everybody, and that's what attracted this confluence of people, as you say, to the plan.
In the course of my profession is the things that see the mistakes and the things that don't get done. And, I look at the field test site as an unrealized vision in many respects. Many people who grew up here since then think it's, just a phenomenal asset, and of course it is, and they're probably much more right than I. But you think about some of the things, they're pretty common now, the idea of adding equestrian areas, outdoor performance spaces. These were all part of the plan back then.
And that may be coming back. Mayor Siciliano is proposing bringing back the amphitheater.
I heard that. Yeah, I heard that. But even the water recreation, there was a big lake involved. It was 10 acres. That was significant water recreation.
Which would have helped the flooding downstream on Poplar Brook, Poplar Village, and provided recreation at the same time.
The Deal Test Site Lake was a partial solution at best. The rest of the water problem was at the bridge where the railroad track was.
Right, downstream.
Way downstream, by Poplar Village, between Deal and Ocean Township. That really needed to be opened up. That was the thing causing the major portion of downstream flooding. And of course, you couldn't open that up because it would have devastated Deal. And until the test site, because the test site would have retained waters and not allowed Deal to get blown away. So there was this two-part study two-part required implementation. It required a lot of buy-ins and money and, fears being allayed and things like that. So that was always the toughest part of it, but you talk about having, things for everybody. There was a lot of concern that you're putting a lake in, and this DEP was problems. You talk about the mastodon that had sunk into the quagmire. 150 years later, we did. And, that was the DEP, and you got sunk into their regulations and their worldview, which is partial at best. They're charged with a great deal of things to take care of, and they have a prejudice which is often beneficial, but it's a prejudice nonetheless. So, we talk about things which have come back in our lifetimes, the devastated, taking all the trees down, and you don't even know it today.
I think our audience is wondering, the lake we're talking about does not exist.
It does not exist. It would have been, behind the buildings, west of the buildings on the geotest site,
Correct.
in the more forested areas on the site at the time. So it looked like you were doing more damage, but you have to protect the buildings. You couldn't put the lake on downstream of the buildings. You had to put the dam for the lake upstream of the buildings. And of course, that was the prettiest place too. So it would have been a better place for siting the lake and allowed other lands to be used more optimally. So that was tough. They were the tough sell on that. Now it was interesting because they had a lot of the monies to buy the site, and now we had to get approval to build the site,
which was about equal money. It was putting up another $1 million.
Yeah.
Well, it was a $2 million development project,
right,
for
which we pay half.
The township would pay half, and Green Acres would pay the other.
Yeah, I think the Girl Scouts going out and doing the survey.
God, that's great.
It was amazing. First of all, you're going to get equestrian when you ask Girl Scouts to come back with something, right? So you just know that's going to be horses involved. So that was great. But it was actually the site to carry it. The site really could, and that's a very common thing these days, equestrian facilities. There was another thing going on in the site that was difficult, was that it was going to have a regional impact. It was well before lots of other parks got developed in the county. Yeah. So it would have a draw, and especially with the facilities we were putting in there.
Mm-hmm.
There could have been sailing on the lake. There was going to be a regional theater. Fishing. Some boating, and then the equestrian facilities. And we had an athlete's glen. We called it that, if you recall. Do you remember that? Yeah, which was basically a wooded area of outdoor athletics. It was kind of my vision of it was kind of something that's happening in China where groups of people would come out at lunchtime and do their thing. And that's kind of what my vision of it was at the time. But it was. The idea was to draw people from. It wasn't a neighborhood park, but it had that sort of draw. It had facilities enough to become something other than, what it eventually became. It's not. It hasn't reached its full potential yet, as pretty and as useful as it is. And
so we never got the funds for the development.
It was wrenching. There was an article that I came across that said 10 years later, it was 1988, and the caption of it in the newspaper was, I think it was Mayor Garrity calls the geotest site development plan a nightmare. And the nightmare was that we could not get through either DEP, the Army Corps of Engineers, the EPA had a lot to say too. They weighed in on Fish and Wildlife, the Division of Fish and Wildlife.
Yeah, I even forgot that. I may have repressed that. But
I mean, it was like, why are they all doing this? Why were they each had a sector that made it impossible to do that without further studies when we'd already put in $100,000 in studies alone.
So it's important to say that the township did approve the development.
They did.
And over the 10 years when all the other government agencies were dragging the feet, the costs kept escalating.
Yeah, I mean, you don't think of it now, inflation being a thing, but it was a big thing.
And had it been approved, there would have been not much developed because the money would not have gone that far.
The mayors, we were talking about the kind of support it had in town, and it went from Mayor Palaia to Mayor English to English.
No, that's right. Mayor English is a big supporter.
Big supporter. And then Mayor Garrity.
Big supporter. And we just had the 50th anniversary of the high school,
Yeah.
It's a beautiful school, right? And the incremental cost of making it beautiful was zero. And the same thing with the geotest site. Over time, these things cost nothing. When we're talking about the engineers getting religion, I think they do have a different approach to these things. And you see the bridges they build in the county are prettier. People take possession of these things, and they want them to be nicer. They don't want the cheapest thing. And people like Vic English and Mayor Garrity and Joe Palaia knew that they were being elected for something other than coming up with the cheapest solution. If you're coming up with the cheapest solution, you can vote for anybody. right? You're trying to vote for somebody who has your values and will spend money where appropriate. And they had the right idea.
Well, they were also influenced by the fact that we did some studies and used the Green Acres brochure to tell the world how important it was to set aside land. And if Gil site, for instance, as a parcel, had been developed, either in various scenarios, either 4 houses per acre, 2 houses per acre, how many more children there would have been going to needing another school. I mean, we want this. The density it was zoned for would have the services.
200 acre zoning.
Right.
350 homes probably.
Yeah.
Really, again, confluence of people at the right time coming together to do basic things. It's really wonderful.
Mentioning the Scouts, so very important to mention that they were continually out there, either putting up bluebird houses
or you got to give credit there. Right?
Yeah, having encampments. The Girl Scouts were even doing litter pickup out there. They were great.
Well, actually, just recently heard Brockel's son.
Don Brockel.
Don Brockel, who leads the scout troop in town, and he had been doing a inventory of all the benches on the Deal Test site that exist there now, photographing them, giving an essay on their quality and whether they needed work, taking a picture of all the plaques, writing the information, rewriting the information that's on the plaques so that they can be reprinted if they get lost, and then we do other work for the town now, and one of the things we do in my business that I run now is software for municipal government. So we have the town map, and we do various things. But one of the things on the Deal Test site, we were able to take all that Boy Scout information, pull it into the software that the town has, and actually display it on the map. So all that stuff. So we have another generation of Rockville's doing good work and Boy Scouts doing good work.
We also, the Land Use Committee of the League of Women Voters, wrote a report about the development, reporting on all the meetings that we held so that we could give this to the council and to the decision makers in town so that they would have some basis for supporting a decision they make.
Yeah, and things were addressed, things that were issues. When people bring up things you don't think of, they these meetings are useful. You can never experience a park like a local person who has experiences the park. So you really do learn a lot as a designer that you kind of bring into it.
And we didn't mention this, but one of the issues in town was we need more ball fields in town. So there was an element of that. We need more recreation fields.
That's true, and that's finally like that through. And I'm saying that it's not everything I wanted the park to be, but if nothing ever happened on that park and it was just blocked, the town would be miles ahead. It would have been miles ahead. And so I look at it through that point, which is I wanted to be as best as you can, but it was pretty awesome.
Well, things were happening. I mean, the soccer fields, the ball fields, the playgrounds. They were wonderful, and yes, they were on a different part of the site from the trail, so that if you wanted to go and not see crowds and whatever, you just take your own path. Just walk down your own path.
And when you're walking the path, you can experience a little bit of action, at that part of the park, and a little bit of solace in other parts of the park. It's very different and interesting.
And now when you walk down the path, it's not unusual at all to see a deer standing maybe 20 feet away from you.
Staring back at you.
Staring back at you.
So even though we didn't get the big development money, the township has put money and investment into the park.
Right.
They've paved the trails. The Environmental Commission actually got a grant and produced a brochure that had a map of the trails inside and a history of the site in here, and reminded people to take pictures and leave footprints, but vice versa.
Ken, I know you've helped a number of Eagle Scouts with their projects on the site. And most have to do with setting up the history as you come off the parking lot, walking down the trail.
There's a sign there.
An introductory sign that gives a history of the site, so that people are reminded of that as well as just park your car, walk the dog, or...
The text for those things were written in 1970. It's amazing. It was all given to me when I was, doing my work on this thing. The original text, suggested text for all this was written probably by Tim, but maybe by others as well, in 1972, maybe, or something like that. It's just amazing how it was all there, how much work had been done preparatory to, 50 years later, putting it aside. It's just amazing.
Well, and I think it's gone a long way in doing what the museum is doing, preserving the past for the future.
You just mentioned the parking lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's an essential part of the park. It's not where you go to park to then do something in the park. You often go to park and then leave the park after half an hour of being in the parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
What are people getting out of that? Well, they're getting away from it all.
Away from it all.
They're parking facing some trees, and they're sitting there listening to the radio, and maybe taking a nap and having lunch or whatever, and then they go. That's incredible. If you added the numbers up, the number of minutes spent in that park, it would blow you away.
It is incredibly well used.
Yeah.
And one of the uses that we should not fail to say is the Italian-American Festival every year. And talk about bringing communities together and people together. I think that it's almost 30 years now that we've been doing it. I think 1977 was the first use of that by them. And the town has improved it, too, by putting in lighting and such like that. And the police and the explorers do a wonderful job of controlling those masses.
Don't forget the Independence Day celebration.
That's right.
Which is probably the best fireworks in the area.
Yeah.
That corner at Beale and Red Pond was originally thought of as a library site.
That's right. I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. That was one of the things that could be built in a Green Acre site.
Uh-huh.
So that was reserved for that, and we were lucky to get a different site for the library, but that would have been a great library site too.
I think it was under Mayor Weldon that the extra 42 or 3 acres that now is the museum and the library extension of the old site, and the meadows and in the middle were added.
I don't feel that this has been integrated into the site yet.
Well, there's a trail now that comes through.
I think there's
and the Boy Scouts
Eagle Scout project to build a bridge.
Yeah.
So, it's starting to happen, but it's a perception thing at the different sites. And it will happen over time, and it'll just make it that much more powerful. Because it's nice to park here and go there.
Yeah, but now on the site, we have the Department of Public Works and a presence there, and with the administrations of Mayor Larkin and now Mayor Siciliano, the park is well maintained, and I think that's a very, very good, important thing. It keeps people coming, they feel safe there.
Even after a snowstorm, they come and plow the parking lot. Mm-hmm. And I know that because I go cross-country skiing on the park.
Yeah, and actually that's a harder task, right, for Mayor Larkin to follow up, and Mayor Siciliano to follow up, because it's not as fun to commit the resources to maintenance. But they did it, and actually improved it.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. And what the Italian American Association did was an improvement. Mm-hmm. Some people may have said, I don't want that there. It's actually a de minimis sort of thing. It takes up a pretty large area. There's virtually no visual impact. It's just pretty. It's pretty in a different way at different times of year. And of course, the several weeks of the year that it is intensely used brings out people for the rest of the year. It introduces so many people to the park. So it's worth it from that standpoint. But yeah, a remarkable job of the Public Works Department doing and keeping the place up. It doesn't ever look like it really gets run down.
That's right. It's pretty each season. I spoke with Kathy Reeser. She's the recreation director of the Office of Human Services, and they oversee the site. And I wanted to know just which of the events bring a number of people, and she very kindly responded saying the community celebrations, the Italian American Festival, 75,000 visitors. Right? So what is it, 5 days, 4 or 5 days there? The 4th of July celebration, which you mentioned, and Fall Fest, which the town runs with kind of a community event.
I actually call it the Independence Day celebration because it's never held on the 4th of July.
That's right, yeah. And then Kathy mentioned other existing but no longer active projects, the memorial benches.
That the number of benches will stay the same, did you say?
Apparently so, because she says no longer active projects. And there's also memorial tree planting. Mm-hmm. And at one time, the commission had a nursery out there of seedlings that could be used to dig up at another time and plant elsewhere.
You guys back, you talk about, far-sighted. You were talking about community gardens on the Deal Test site, 1975.
That's right.
That is just a movement that didn't start, to gain national attention until about 5 years ago.
And we were going to, the thing that kept us from doing it was the lack of water.
By the way, I call it the Deal Test site. I'm sorry.
I know. You know what? It was dedicated in, I think, 1999 as the Joe Palaia Park.
And I love Joe Palaia.
Yeah.
Nothing against Joe.
No, I know. It's just that we were grounded so early. It's like what you call your grandmother.
And for 30 years we were calling it the Deal Test site.
That's right. And I think that one of the publications that the town has shows a picture of Reba Eichhorn, one of the founding people of the museum, and Ann Stiles with Joe Palaia at the inauguration of calling it the Joe Palaia Park. And I'm sure he can be very, very proud of that too. And that was. And all the people on all the councils that worked with them all to do that.
Yeah.
And it really took that leadership to do that. So,
well, the leadership by the councils and the legwork by the township administrators.
Yes, let's remember the administrators. I think we had, 4 or 5 mayors, 4 or 5 administrators, including Fenton, Greg Sternbeck, Dave Cockle,
yes.
And they were almost so frustrated by all of this hitting their heads. I mean, as you must have been, right? But you interacted with all of them too, and they were always pushing through, though, weren't they? They were always trying to push this through.
Well, let's not forget the current township manager, Andrew Brannon, is continuing this tradition.
It's an amazing thing. The park is still a living thing because it keeps giving back to the community. It really does. And
that community changes. So, now Ann Crew's job is to pass it along better, right? So, and he does. He has to defend what was there, what's been done, understand its impact in the township, and appropriately to pass it along again. It's interesting. And that's how it grows. And it becomes something bigger than anybody ever knew because of the number of people who have to do that. And it's fun to watch continue with a whole different group of people.
Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful discussion, and I hope in years to come people view this and hope to get an appreciation of just went into and the people and the places and the effort that went into establishing our Central Park. And we thank you. We hope you will watch again on another edition of Hometown Histories. You've seen how many challenges the town has faced preserving open space. But the park keeps on giving to the community, as does this property, where our valued museum and library sit. And that's the extension of the original 208 acres. Join us again next time for another story of the people and places that have made this community what it is today. Why not contact the museum with your story?